I say whether you are ratified or articulated, obedient, kwankwasia, or have any other political affiliation, you voted and struggled for a better Nigeria, more hopeful nation. And I thank you for your participation and dedication to our democracy. You decided to place your trust in the democratic vision of a Nigeria founded on a shared prosperity, and one nurtured by the ideas of unity, justice, peace, and tolerance.
So that's the 70-year-old president-elect of Nigeria, that's Bola Tinubu. Lawyer Akin Omaside is joining us from Lagos, Nigeria-based private legal practitioner, constitutional lawyer. Thank you so much, Lawyer Akin Omaside. Appreciate your time. So you are seeing the protest even where you are, and taking into consideration the calls for the cancellation of some of the results, and then what some of the parties have indicated they're going to do, challenge the result in court. What's your take on what the way forward should be?
Well, there are sections of the Electoral Act that have been breached in the electioneering process. One, there's the issue of the voting, the secret voting. None of the candidates voted secretly, according to the dictates of Section 122 of the Electoral Act. And there are penalties for breaches of the Electoral Act. Number two is that the announcement of the results should have been made at the polling unit. If you look at Section 60 and Section 64 of the Electoral Act. Now, there are penalties for the breaches of the Electoral Act. There's terms of imprisonment as well as financial penalties, fines. However, the call for the cancellation of the results is emotional, in the sense that there's no reason why the elections should be cancelled under the law. Yes, there have been challenges with the collation of the results, the recording of the election, the voting. There's been allegations of malpractices. And as you would observe, of course, the foreign observers have said that there were a lot of compromises here and there. So the elections have taken place. There have been challenges. The bimodal system has not worked as expected. We expected that there'll be electronic transmission of results from the polling units to the servers. That has not worked as efficiently and effectively as we had anticipated. Not only that, there has been cases where INEC officials, the National Electoral Commission officials have been compromised. Of course, there have been ballot stealing, ballot boxes stealing. There have been protests at polling units. We know all those issues have occurred. All those events have occurred. However, is that enough to cancel these widespread elections that are taking place in 36 states, as well as the Federal Capital Territory? Also, there could be the issue of, okay, yes, we know the system or the processes did not work as well as anticipated. But in the light of all of that, my view is that the elections, in the main, the elections were okay. They were not perfect. They didn't score the high marks or the pass marks, but they were just okay.
Okay, but you see, that's where the problem is. You've just rated it as just okay. It didn't get the pass mark. So if you admit that some of the electoral rules, as you indicated earlier, were violated, I mean, what's the process of redress or addressing the rules that were violated? Because that could potentially also compromise the credibility of the election results.
Yeah, thank you. But then, does it affect the credibility of the majority of the results? You see, and we have a slippery slope that we need to be careful about, in the sense that we have three main parties now, or three main presidential aspirants, candidates, better still. Every one of them will be challenging the integrity of the process of the system where it does not favor them. One will challenge it in the northeastern states, another will challenge it in the southwestern states, another will challenge it in the southeastern states, sections of the country. Do we now say because all of that is happening, we should cancel the whole elections? When will it stop? Because if you have another election, what is the guarantee that some of these issues will not reoccur? And what were the issues that occurred? One, voting materials did not get to the polling booths, to the polling units on time. Two, INEC officials did not get to the polling units on time, to the polling centers on time. Three, the beavers did not work. Four, they could not verify voters. Five, at a time, the machines failed. They ran out of battery. There was network connectivity issues, so that they could not upload the results from the center to the main server. There were compromises. Some of the officials were compromised. So there are so many issues. Manual recording, which the system was meant to avoid. So there are a myriad of issues that affected the voting process. However, where do we stop? If in one center you complain that the materials did not arrive on time, the ballot papers did not arrive on time. In another section, in another polling center, you might say, oh, the officers arrived late. In another, it might be the case that the system failed. So what do we do? Do we throw the baby and the bathwater away? I don't think so. We need to take a pragmatic decision. And that pragmatic decision will be, okay, we've had issues. And we've always had issues concerning our voting. There's not been any election that has been totally free of some form of challenges in Nigeria. It is getting better. This same process and infrastructure were used in two elections, two states, and there were not as much complaints. This is now widespread, that over 90 million people were involved in. Maybe the system crashed. Of course, there are lessons learned. I was on another program, another TV program in Lagos over the weekend, and my view is there are lessons learned, and INEC should take stock and ensure that these things do not happen again.
Anyway, but you see, there are issues that borders on the law. If there were other administrative matters, then you could say, okay, we could deal with it. But you're a lawyer, okay? So as long as you admit that some of the electoral laws were breached, would you agree with those who say that you might only be accepting some mediocre standards if you allow these results to stand, regardless of your admission that some of the laws were violated?
Well, if you say mediocrity, it's unfortunate that a nation of over 200 million has in the past and over time celebrated mediocrity, unfortunately. But the way I look at it, as I said, it's a pragmatic decision. If there's one, the act, the cancellation, the grounds for cancellation, are they really in existence? Yes. The integrity of some of the results can be questioned. So rather than the pragmatic approach is, rather than having a wholesale review and say, oh, we're going to have another election, it's going to cost us fortunes, it's going to cost us pain, before the election, Nigerians were in pain, serious pain. There was no money to move around. There was fuel prices, logistic issues that affected us. So are we ready to go through that again? But not only that, yes, I agree, some of the results have integrity issues, but does that make the whole system have integrity issues? I dare say no.
Okay. So it's a matter of perspective, is it not? Akim Omisade, thank you so much for your time on Ghana Tonight. Akim Omisade is a Lagos-based constitutional lawyer joining us live from Lagos on this. Appreciate your time. But stay with me here on Ghana Tonight. Professor Bafo Agyeman-Duah, who is a former governance advisor to the United Nations and also an election observer. He's observed elections in about 12 African countries, including Nigeria, not too long ago. He's going to be joining us in the studio. Take a look.
Now Atiku will win because of people they suffer. This Buhari government, they not do well for people.
I'm not going to vote again. I'm not going to challenge anybody. I'm not going to vote again.
We have 16.7 million more voters in Nigeria than the other 14 countries in our sub-region, West Africa, put together. There is enthusiasm on the part of Nigerians to vote. There is also an equal determination on the part of the Commission to ensure that the votes count.
They just carry us come here, come make us homeless. Since yesterday, 4 o'clock, we never talk. We never talk, oh, we never talk. We came to serve the island, no food, since yesterday.
Right, welcome back. This is Ghana Tonight on TV3. We're live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook. Now, we've been with you every step of the way, covering the Nigeria elections before, during, and after the election itself. This is your Election Command Center with a man, Kamala Kluche, on the ground in there. The elections are over. A number of issues, the fallouts. It's what we're having a conversation on tonight. Professor Bafo Agyeman-Duah is a former governance advisor at the United Nations, Chief Executive Officer of the John Agyekum Kufuor Foundation. And Prof is with us in the studio. Prof, good to have you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to have you.
You've been part of some observer missions to some elections.
Oh, very much so. I observed elections in about 12 different African countries, including Nigeria.
Including Nigeria?
Correct.
12 African countries?
Yes.
What runs through all the elections that you observed on the continent?
In all those elections, commonality I found is some kind of a little violence, some places extreme violence, as it was in Zimbabwe in 2001. In Nigeria, where I was observing the election that brought President Obasanjo to power in 1999. I observed many of the things that occurred in these latest elections, and I was surprised that after all these years, Nigeria doesn't seem to have overcome these serious challenges in the elections, including ballot snatching, as I saw this time in the videos, violence, and all kinds of things that, of course, Ghana, we have our own problems, but I think the case of Nigeria is a very intriguing one, I should say.
Yeah. A very interesting point. So you've, in all these 12 African countries, you were an election observer in violence, snatching of ballot boxes. Yes. How does that compromise the credibility or integrity of the outcome of the elections?
You know, if we're to go by violence and ballot snatching and ballot stuffing, as I witnessed in Nigeria in 1999, if we were to go by that, then all elections that I observed would not have been,
free and fair.
Exactly. But you see, election observers go in to observe elections, not to put fuel in the fire, so to speak. But part of the job is to also moderate things and make sure there's no outbreak of violence, especially in African countries. So sure, we go after free and fair elections, but then when you observe so much violence, then of course you are bound to tell the country the truth that you saw. In the case of Nigeria, for instance, back in 1999, I remember vividly because I was there with the NDI, the National Democratic Institute of Washington, D.C., and former President Jimmy Carter of USA was the head. He headed the Carter Center's observation, but we worked together because I was representing the American group. And I remember Carter left Lagos with extreme anger and never gave his verdict until he was somewhere across the Atlantic when he messaged that this was the worst election I've seen. So
he described that election as the worst election he had seen.
Yes,
that was after he left Nigeria.
Precisely. Well, this is an insider story I have. It was never made official like that, but I know the frustration that he had. And that was back in 1999. That's why I'm saying I'm surprised that all these years, almost 20 years after, we are still not witnessing a much improved election process in Nigeria. I know that they have announced the winner, and the winner has made a nice speech appealing for unity. And I hope the winner will the declared winner will find a way to accommodate the opposition and those who are very angry by the outcome of the elections in Nigeria.
You were more of an external observer this time with what happened in Nigeria. What did you see? Well,
first of all, I think the Electoral Commission over there gave a number of assurances that their new system was going to be great. They are going to get results instantly. All the promises were given, but in actual fact, at the end of it, those promises were not fulfilled. And that was part of the frustration of the opposition groups in Nigeria. The security assured the people there will be peace, there will be no room for ballot snatching and all. I heard the head of the security again on television giving that assurances. Yet we know that some areas were no-go areas, especially the so-called former Biafran territory.
That's right.
Eastern part of Nigeria, where they banned electoral materials and all. So again, the security promised, but they couldn't fulfill. And of course, there was supposed to be transparency in the whole process. And I think in the beginning there was, but I think during the process itself, they were not able to again ensure that that came to be. So that has been the problem with Nigerian elections now, as well as many other African countries. But I think after all is said and done, Nigeria has to have peace in order to go about the multitude of challenges that the country is facing currently.
You see, that's where the concern is. So after everything, regardless of the concerns that were raised by the various stakeholders in the election, they are being urged to move on, regardless of what may have also compromised the integrity of the election outcome.
It's a tough issue. It's a very tough issue, because if you don't do that, then you are kind of encouraging some kind of outbreak of violent conflict, you see. And it's a challenge most election observers face. I mean, I saw the reports of the ECOWAS group there. I saw that of the EU group, AU group and all. And of course, it would be irresponsible on their part to proclaim that this was the worst election and therefore we can't support it, blah, blah, blah. If you do that, then of course you are throwing fuel.
But you see, that's where the concern is.
Yes.
So then observers are caught between telling the truth, the reality, and then also sounding diplomatic to ensure peace. I mean, so how does the observer group serve the interest of the people there if you are not facing reality because you don't want to be the fuel for any post-election violence? So even if you're saying that something is going wrong, in your report, you're going to sound good.
No, not at all. That's not what I mean. In all reports, you see the chronicling of all the incidents.
Right.
All the incidents will be chronicled, all right? And then, of course, recommendations will be made for the Electoral Commission and the country as a whole to take measures to address that. That happens all the time. The issue is, after the elections and the Electoral Commission has proclaimed the winner, do you then turn around and challenge the commission? You see, it's a very sad situation in a way, because if in fact there's ample evidence of fraud or other kinds of malpractices in the elections, and yet you support the decision of the Electoral Commission. That is a sad one. But I think uppermost in the minds of such international groups, as I say, is the peace of the country. Because nobody can afford to see a country like Nigeria exploding.
Indeed.
For that matter, any other country in the sub-region exploding. And as responsible observers, whilst you chronicle and announce the infractions that you observed, at the same time you seek accommodation for all factions to come together and make sure the country survives.
In fact, I watched a leader of one of the observer groups actually criticizing the other observer missions in Nigeria, accusing them of, being compromised because they were all praising the INEC, that they've done a good job and so on. But she was a woman, actually came out and said, you know what, I disagree with all you observer groups because what I saw was different from what you are commending INEC for. That's she reflecting the reality.
Yes,
so,
and that is fine. I think that is fine. You have to have people who can do that. But you see, that comment, I believe, was given prior to the announcement of
prior to the announcement,
exactly.
That's true.
Prior to the announcement. But I don't know if after the announcement, this same person will come and make the same statement. Maybe the person will. But of course, if there's an overwhelming sentiments by the other observers that, sure, we acknowledge the infractions, we acknowledge the malpractices, we acknowledge the ballot stuffing, which I saw on many occasions in Nigeria 20 years ago or more, then you can understand that there's nothing like clean elections in Africa. That one I can assure you.
There's nothing like clean elections in Africa.
From what I've seen around, I don't know which country really give. I can tell you, in Cameroon, 2004, what I saw in Cameroon was unbelievable, you see. In Zimbabwe, of course, the veterans were then rampaging the place, burning houses and farms and all. Again, I saw that. I was in Liberia right after the Civil War in 1997. I saw the elections. And when you have a country like Liberia with a vast majority of illiterates, then you can imagine what the so-called few educated people will do in winning elections in such countries. I've seen that. Of course, in my own country a few times.
In Ghana?
Yeah. I mean, I've observed Ghanaian elections with the exception of 1992 when I was not in the country. Subsequently, 96 and every elections I've observed in my own individual capacity as part of CODEO when I used to work at CDD. So I've seen all these elections. But you see...
And in all those 19 instances where you were an observer of the elections, none of them passed that box or that mark of being clean, free, fair. I mean, well, free but not fair and transparent.
Exactly. It can be free but not fair, you see. It can be free but not fair. So the issue is how you grade it. And again, it depends on the level of violence that occurred or level of intimidations or level of manipulations or level. You have to weigh all that.
Right.
But I'm saying that there's nothing like clean elections. In fact, I would dare tell you, advanced democracies, they don't have clean elections. We saw what happened in the U.S. U.S. but so-called democratic America has experienced that. So you see, if we are serious as a people, what we have to begin to question is whether this form of selecting our leaders is the best form for us, especially in Africa, where attitudes and culture and traditions are very different. We need to question that because democratic practice is never written in stone. The principles, the values are universal. But when it comes to practicing, let's say, how do you pose the question, how do we select our presidents? There's room for you to engineer a system that will be fair to all. We are not tied to putting a ballot in the box. Look, South Africa, do they elect their president? No. Once a party wins majority, they choose who is the president. Is that not democratic? It is.
So you would expect that we would fashion our own kind of democracy that responds or reflect our values and traditions as a people?
Our own kind of practice democracy. Because when you say democracy, people think of the values that are universal, and they seldom think of the practice, which can be different from other countries.
Right.
The way democracy is practiced in America is not the same as in Britain.
Indeed.
Okay? It's not the same as in Germany, not the same as in Japan.
So they say ours is a hybrid of the two.
Ours is a hybrid, and not only that, we didn't do a good job examining how some of our own traditions and history could have been crafted into the way we organize and practice democracy. Yeah, it's an issue that I've been pondering over this, and I think intellectuals have to look at it. We see we do not have to swallow everything that is Western. And my concern at the moment is that the way we practicing democracy, like you mentioned, hybrid, we take a little bit from Britain, a little bit from United States. What about a little bit from Ghanaians or Ghana history or Ghana traditions? Nothing, right? So the British never took anything from Ghana. The Americans didn't take anything from Britain when they were structuring, engineering their democratic practice. You see? So for me, after 30 years here and many other years in other countries, I think Africans should begin to rethink how democracy ought to be practiced. And again, I'm making the difference between practice democracy, which is reflected in the institutions and systems that we create, and principle democracy, which are the universal values of freedoms, participation, and everything else we can think of, the liberties that we must have as a free people. But it's not the same as practicing it.
Right.
Practicing it requires your own thinking about your history, your culture, the composition of the population, the people, and based on that, you create structures and institutions that will help you to have a more effective system.
Very interesting point. But we're going into an election ourselves. I mean, what are some of the takeaways that you think that the Ghanaian electoral management body, and for us as a people, we should take from what's happened in Nigeria?
Well, the good news is that the chairperson of our commission was present. I don't know how long she stayed there, but certainly she was there, observed the elections, and I'm sure she's aware of all the challenges that the Nigerians faced, and therefore that should instruct her and her commission to do what is right and proper for Ghana, especially since there's so much on these upcoming elections. But if you ask me what my own impressions or observations should lead in terms of what we learned from Nigeria, clearly the issues of consultation is primary in my mind. In other words, how the Electoral Commission engages all the key stakeholders, especially the political parties, in coming to certain consensus on what needs to be done. I know we know currently there are some troubling issues for some parties in terms of using the Ghana card, for all these issues.
In fact, the minority addressed the press today. They raised concerns, and already there are allegations against the Electoral Commission possibly putting measures in place to connive and get government, I mean, the ruling party to win the election. So already the stakes are high.
Frankly, I don't know which election in Ghana that had high stakes, you know. Well, this one may be higher than others, but I think generally every election we have faced has faced some threats to our security and all. So I'm not surprised by that. But I think the biggest issue here is the seeming distrust, the lack of trust between the opposition and the Electoral Commission. And since the court case that followed the 2022 elections.
This is 2020 elections.
2020 elections, sorry. Clearly, the relations between the Commission and the NDC has been quite bad. And I think all stakeholders must find a way to bring all sides together for reconciliation and collectively making certain decisions. Yes, I saw the statement by the NDC this morning, and there's a portion that relates to the fact that between 2018 and August 2022 or so, there have been no contact between them and so they were not participants in the decision that led to the C1, the CI that is now being debated. And that for me is shocking because when you operate electoral body like that without a major player like the political parties not being part of it, it becomes troubling. So I'm hoping that in the next, in the coming weeks or so, a way will be found to bring them together. I think the Peace Council or any other respectable authority in the country should help to bring these two sides together because we cannot walk into an election that has so much suspicions. Already people are concluding that it's been fixed for the ruling party. That in itself doesn't disturb me because it comes almost at every election. But this one seems to be really...
So what should the Electoral Commission be seen to be doing to also restore that lost trust between it and the NDC especially? Because, I mean, Dr. Kujafari-Jan said that every time he's been accused of being in bed with one political party or the other, depending on who's in power.
That's right.
But what's happening now, has the actions and inactions of the current commission also increased the levels of mistrust that we are seeing?
Yeah, I don't know the level of the actions and inactions of the commission. What I do know is that the NDC has boycotted meetings by the Electoral Commission. But the commission cannot just sit back and say, well, you boycotted it and therefore we are moving on. Because we cannot move on successfully without the other party, you see. Because the other party is a big party and have the capacity to cause problems for all of us as a country.
Right.
And we don't want that.
I see. That's where the challenge is, really, and that's where the concern is. In fact, Professor Balfour Jumendia, I appreciate your time, and thank you for coming here on Ghana Tonight. He is the former United Nations governor on, that's advisor on governance, and also the CEO of the John Agyekum Kufuor Foundation. Professor Balfour Jumendia, thank you so much. But the minority earlier today, they addressed the press. Take a look at this. Dr. Kesla Tufo is minority leader.
The proposed CI, which makes the Ghana card the sole requirement for voter registration, serves as a restraint on citizens' right to register and exercise their franchise in elections. The Electoral Commission is to undertake programs for the expansion of the registration of voters. Instead, the EC rather seeks to undertake a program for the restriction of the registration of voters.
Dr. Kesela Tuforsen said the Electoral Commission has not provided sufficient grounds for the removal of the guarantor system in the voter registration process, arguing it is a deliberate plot to deprive millions of Ghanaians from getting their names onto the electoral roll.
It is therefore unclear to us what mischief the Electoral Commission is seeking to cure by relying solely on the Ghana card as a source document for the registration of voters, yet intends to completely outlaw the guarantor system, which constituted about 40% of Ghana card registration. We hold the view that the time-tested guarantor system must be maintained in our voter registration processes, and this position is absolutely non-negotiable. The suspicion of collusion by the ruling party and the Electoral Commission to rig the election for the ruling party continues to drive the situation towards dispute and potential violence.
Let's see how the coming days will be like as we get towards this election 2024. Well, the former president, John Mahama, who's also picked nomination forms to contest the flag bearership of the NDC, is set to launch his campaign tomorrow. And so stay with us as we get into all of that. But the Ghana Health Service has announced that 12 more cases of Lassa fever have been recorded in the country. The additional cases were confirmed after contact tracing and testing of the 2 index cases announced on Sunday, February 24. Let's go on to Zoom quickly. And Dr. Franklin Esiedu-Bekoin is the Director of Public Health at the Ghana Health Service. Thank you so much for joining us. So can you update us on the number of cases across the country and how the picture looks like now?
Okay, so thank you very much. I think I need to put in perspective that the data will keep on increasing. What is happening is that we've declared an outbreak of Lassa in, I'll say, Greater Accra. By the fact that when you confirm a case of Lassa, just one confirmed case is assumed to be an outbreak. And by virtue of that, what you try to do is that you try to identify all contacts of the case. So we have 2 confirmed cases, and we are trying to gather all the contacts. So the numbers keep on changing. And if you look at the initial stage, we had just 2, but then 12 of the contacts have become cases. So we are going to identify their contacts. So I know that we're going to move into the hundreds in the next few days. But for us, so far as it is of the original cohort, I don't think we are much worried, because it's about an exposure. So individuals were exposed to infected persons at a point in time, and we are following them. So we will get worried when we get a new case who is not part of this group. And that one, it means that it's a new outbreak started. So I want to say that as I speak now, we have 97 contacts, and then we have 14 confirmed cases. And I think that somewhere in Central Region 2 had one probable case. We are waiting for the confirmation. If it's confirmed, we also identify their contacts, and then we do the contact tracing.
Anyway, but have you been able to trace the source of the original, that's the 2 initial cases recorded?
No, I see the source is not very obvious now. We know that there's literature that supports that the reservoir, which is a mastomys rat, is a bit scattered in several parts of the country. So we may be able to ascertain where it's coming from, and maybe we're able to ascertain the original source. So we're still going to do the investigation. One thing is that if you have an environment which is deficit in terms of cleanliness, then you are likely to attract these rats. So if you have your kitchen is not very clean, if your environment is not very clean, these rats will come by, and then they will actually come and infect your food, and that may infect you. So it's not restrictive to where you can get the rats. The only issue is that how clean is your environment. That is the underlying factor.
I see. But so how many regions have recorded these Lassa fever cases?
So as of now, we have the confirmed cases are from Greater Accra. But as I said, Central Region 2 has one probable case. We are waiting for the confirmation. So if it comes, but then they are not anything at all. Let me say that they are not linked. They are not linked at all. What is good is I think we have a good laboratory network in the country that's able to confirm. Because if you look at the presentation of Lassa, it may present like malaria, fever, general bodily pains, malaise. So a person can treat with malaria. So if you don't have the capacity to diagnose, you'll not be able to diagnose Lassa. So I think that it's good that we have the capacity to confirm Lassa in the country.
So while you put measures in place, what should the public also do to protect ourselves?
So I think that the main thing we want to stress is the level of cleanliness must be up there, because if you are leaving your on leftover food in your kitchen, you're actually exposing your house to possible infection with the Lassa virus. If your surroundings is not that clean, you are going to expose yourself to the Lassa virus. Then also, if let's say you're handling an infected person, you can also be exposed. So what this whole idea means is to improve on environmental management. make sure that it is within the household and even on the outside. You cannot afford to be displaying like maize or food substances in your house and go and sleep. You actually attract rats, and they will come and infect you. So now there's no need to leave food in your kitchen. If you want to do it, then you need to make sure that it's well covered properly. And then also, what you want to inform Ghanaians is that when you have a fever, don't assume that it's malaria. It is not every fever which is malaria. When you have a fever, you want to ask Ghanaians immediately go to a health facility. One thing that we did at the early stage of the outbreak was to send an alert to clinicians or health workers. Doctors actually diagnose what is common. So if they are not aware that there's Lassa, they will never think about it. So we have sent an alert, and that also includes the case definitions that will help them to suspect Lassa and take samples if they think that you fall into that case definition. So that's also one thing that we're hoping that
you'll be able to also get the public to appreciate that. Thank you so much, Dr. Franklin Siedo-Bekoe. And you're going to have these measures for the viewers also on 3news.com and TV3 Ghana on Facebook, so you can always get there and get some more news. On behalf of the rest of the team, thank you so much for staying with us here on Ghana Tonight. I am Alfred Okanse. Have a good night.